Welcome to the Bug Hunters Cafe.
Thanks. Hi, Jason. Where is the unicorn?
He's in back. He wanted to learn a new hobby, so he took up wood turning.
Oh, that sounds harmless. Has he made anything cool yet?
So far, 27 paper towel holders.
Yes, and I'm running out of room on the counter.
Maybe we should start giving them away to customers.
What, with every coffee, a free paper towel holder?
Sure, why not? So, who are we meeting with today?
Oh, my friend Joshua Jacobs. He's a PhD in applied mathematics with a passion for data science and 3D visualization, which he's been applying to neuroscience for the past 9 years. He's also amazing at mentorship, team building, networking with other people, guitar.
Cool. So, when will he be here?
Oh, he got here 2 hours ago. He's the one teaching wood turning to the unicorn. Oh, hey, there he is.
Another 2 paper towel holders. Oh, joy.
Well, at least the unicorn seems proud of himself. Hey, Joshua. Sorry you got roped into that.
Can I get you anything? The coffee sounds so terrific. They're the ones sponsoring these chats.
I actually, maybe, I'm a little vanilla here. I always go into my favorite cafe, which is Cafe Steam in Rochester, Minnesota, and I order a medium latte. That I go and I sit and I observe the other customers, and sometimes for months, and then I say hello. And this is one of my networking strategies, you see, is go to the same cafe at the same time as often as possible and observe. And by the time I actually say hello, I'm familiar with the people and they are with me. It's bizarre how that proximal familiarity makes stepping on somebody's toes a networking opportunity.
I'll go ahead and grab your stalker latte. I shouldn't tease. I do it too. It works. It's great.
Yeah.
We're just gonna give a warning to our listeners that this is a terrible dating advice.
It is. It's terrible dating advice. I entirely agree. Never use this technique with that kind of intention. It's disgusting. It will backfire on you. You'll get
you will get a series at Netflix.
No. You'll get a hot latte to the face. You do not want to do this.
Yeah. So, Josh.
Yes, sir.
Let us begin this unofficial official talk. Tell us about you. What's the coolest thing you did today?
I finished We Are Legion by Dennis E. Taylor. About a bunch of robot clones that go exploring the galaxy and, defend against evil.
And how are they called?
Bob.
And that's not an acronym.
No, it's We Are Bob. They're all Bob. That is like Bob 1, Bob 2, etc. But they decide to rename themselves to like Khan and Homer Simpson and Calvin. And one objects very strongly to being called Hobbs. But it's really funny and very cute. I enjoyed it, and my 8-year-old daughter asked me why I was trying to finish it while she was telling me about parakeet eggs.
Okay. The next question is, what is so awesome about parakeet eggs?
So, her teacher brought a parakeet egg home from the pet store because the pet store had a male parakeet and a female parakeet. They sold the female parakeet, and a day later they found the egg at the bottom of the female parakeet's cage. And so the teacher brought it home and put it in an incubator and turned it over 3 times a day. And within 18 days, he had a baby parakeet that he had to feed with an eyedropper. And so I'm just hearing this story from my daughter, and it's all very, very adorable and cute.
That's the best teacher ever.
Here is your medium latte, and I have heard snatches of conversation about robots and parakeets, so I'm going to assume this went the usual non sequitur direction, and
This is who I am. I'm sorry. Unapologetically non sequitur.
Oh, I never said there was anything wrong with going
I
non sequitur. I mean, it's the usual is the key word here. I mean, it's
Okay.
we usually go non sequitur.
Excellent. So that's really I am moving on at the moment. I'm moving on from a position at Flywheel, who did the curation of clinical research data and all sorts of cool visualizations of brains, and I've even taken to doing a longitudinal study of um, a close relative's brain. She got a scan 10 years ago, and one just recently. And so I decided to put them into something called Free Surfer to do a parcellation of the cortical and subcortical regions of her brain, and then compare her brain 10 years ago to her brain now. And all I can say is there's a bit of gray matter recession away from the meninges, which is basically the layer right between your skull and your brain. But this happens to everyone over the age of say, 20. We get this retreat of the gray matter away from the skull as we age. Um, so that's no big. But what we're really looking at is, do any of the subcortical regions change in overall shape and volume in that 10 years? That would be much more of a concern that I would. But you know, but then you get to spit out all of these really cool three-dimensional visualizations of brains.
And I can imagine this makes for some fascinating, holiday Thanksgiving conversation. When if anything starts getting really awkward, that relative, you can go, well, I know more about your brain than you do.
Things are a little bit closer than that, shall we say. I see this relative more often than just on holidays.
Oh, good. You have more opportunities.
Yeah, and then I have another exactly. I have another relative that works in the COVID ward at Mayo Clinic as a nurse practitioner, telling me all sorts of things like about the pulmonologist and the different kinds of people that are being admitted. What their pre-existing conditions are, the distribution of like diabetics, obese, elderly, and I'm like, wow. So I get the inside scoop on a couple of different angles here. Somebody's brain, COVID ward. It's a little weird.
That is pretty awesome, though. And you mentioned 3D visualizations. You use programming and data science to analyze this stuff.
Yes. Well, if you call looking at statistical analyses of somebody's subcortical regions data analysis or data science, okay. That word the word data science has been such a ambiguous moniker for a long time. I'm like, just doing to statisticians, data science means one thing, and to computer scientists, it can mean something a bit different. The statisticians are famously jealous of calling parts of their field data science without their permission to do so. And the computer scientists are like, well, so we can just automate all this stuff. What do we need you for? So, I come from an academic background where, I was used to math and stats departments being kind of fused together. And then as I got into bigger and bigger academic institutions, saw how acrimoniously divorced they were from one another. I'm like, whoa, this is such a shame. They have so much to offer one another. Why would they want to get a divorce?
And somewhere, somehow, some criminologist is going to listen to this conversation and is going to immediately understand the motive of why a mathematician beat a programmer to death with a pocket protector.
Yeah.
No, this is not my first run in. Hearing about kind of what goes weird with the academic world, because I have a friend in Boston who studies whale ears. This is what he does: is he uses Python to analyze data for whale ears. And he's gotten to do dissections on humpback whales that were beached and things like that. And anyway, so he actually has access. I'm not kidding. He actually has access to a freezer full of ears at the university. So, you think you have weird friends?
This is awesome.
Absolutely. So he was actually one of my technical reviewers for my books. So, that was.
So Python has become such a de facto language across scientific fields because it's so accessible. But when you have somebody that doesn't have, like, say, me, a lot of experience living in just one computer language at length, you get all sorts of crazy commenting styles and code structures and people not even knowing what PEP8 protocol is and not caring just because it's getting the job done. And it's horrendous code to read. Oh my God. So that's what you don't want. You don't want a neuroscientist writing Python code or at least maintaining the code. You want them writing what they want and then having somebody a little more versed in code keeping protocol, yes, like Bojan, to clean it up for them and inquire what in the hell they were thinking when they named this function.
That's what I do for a living, actually. I basically am, I don't know, it's data engineering, MLOps, there are a bunch of words, but I basically speak with scientists, take their 2,000 lines of code where each variable is named x1, x2, x3, and so on. Take the scientific work that they use, because that's the comment. Like, yeah, I just use this work, and then transform that into code. And then turn that into production site, and all those things.
And so they can share it with their colleagues, and their colleagues won't run away screaming.
Yes. And they can say, oh, this is so beautiful.
Exactly.
You're such a good programmer.
There's a tool out there that our friend Lais worked at a company called Quantum Black. And while she was working there, she got to help on this tool called Kedro. And Kedro is this really neat data science tool for Python that I have not used it. This is kind of secondhand knowledge and looking at the website and hearing about it. But it helps clean up that data pipeline and make it more maintainable. So it helps encourage, the non-programmers who are maintaining the code to, do things in a way that's actually maintainable and replicatable, etc. But just kind of automating some of the stuff that's going to be nauseating to them. But I can imagine with those sorts of things, then you're going to wind up with all sorts of errors and bugs. And I know bugs in your field are really, they take on a different flavor. One that comes to mind for me is when we had to throw out all of the functional MRIs for about 20 years, from about a 20-year span because of a floating point error in the code that has been in use since 1980 whatever. And there was a floating point error in that code, and no one caught it for 20 years, and it wound up messing up the data visualization for 20 years worth of fMRIs.
Yeah, but there's the difference between the qualitative analysis and the quantitative analysis, where the qualitative analysis can still give you a general picture of what blood oxygen levels are effective in different regions of the brain for your fMRI. However, the quantitative analysis is going to be off. So the figures and numbers are going to be totally wrong, whereas the qualitative analysis of these brain regions were more active than these other brain regions are going to still hold.
If I remember the bug story, though, it was that part of which brain regions were actually active that got messed up. It was actually that. And so where they say, well, this part lit up and this part didn't light up, that's the data that got screwed up. That's why they had to throw it all out, because they went, we don't know what happened. but this data is now unusable. We can't verify any of it because it's
Oh crap!
floating point errors in the core data. They would have to redo
Oh.
brain scans.
Oh God! So yeah, so having that, like, say, a floating point error, which would flip the sign of the entire variable in question, or add add or subtract orders of magnitude in a random fashion, that would be horrendous.
Yeah, and a whole bunch of cognitive psychologists just started weeping because the entire foundation for their field crumbled out from underneath them because somebody that, word to the wise, do not use floating point numbers for absolutely critical things that you don't want rounded funny.
Yeah,
You don't ever use them for finance. You never use them for finance because you can't trust them. You use integers.
Yes, because you don't like, unlike what was that movie, Superman 3, with Richard Pryor, you don't take a fraction of a cent. What?
Well, that was my scheme. Now I have to change it. I thought it was original.
I'm just trying to wrap my head. I'm just trying to visualize Richard Pryor as Superman right now.
No. Richard Pryor wasn't Superman.
He was the main evil guy.
Okay, because I was going to say I cannot picture Richard Pryor as super. That's like trying to picture Jim Carrey as Batman. I mean, it just does not connect.
No.
Jim Carrey would make an awesome Batman and a Riddler in the same movie.
No. So Richard Pryor, I think it was a mid to late '80s movie. I'm sure we can look it up, but I'm just riffing. He played this computer genius that ended up like taking all of the rounding errors for the financial transactions and sticking them into a bank account, and became extremely rich from like just skimming off the rounding errors. And then he was like, he was busted, and says, well, that sucks for you. You're such a naughty genius now. How about you do something really impactful with your mind? And so he creates a supercomputer that Superman has to fight, et cetera, et cetera. Drama.
Oh my. Yeah, but in reality that wouldn't happen because we don't use floating points for finance. So
exactly.
Or we shouldn't be using floating points for finance.
This is like,
so that's the most unrealistic part for you, not the Superman, not the evil robots.
No, it's just the fact they're using the floating point integers. That's a believability error right there.
This breaks immersion for me.
Absolutely.
There's
Jurassic Park. Hey, it would take a lot longer to get into a Unix system than that.
Yes. So there's an imaging format that all images come from. All clinical images come through what's called the DICOM format. You take ultrasound, you take MRI, you take positron emission tomography, you take CT, you take X-ray. Like, all images are now stored in this DICOM format that has all sorts of crazy information about the manufacturing scanner, about the patient themselves, about the different parameters that were used to make the scan, just a whole horde of stuff. But yet, many of these, like at least the ones that I was using recently, they only took 8 and 16-bit unsigned integers for their imaging data. No floating point. Mm-hmm. So if I found like floating point numbers or any kind of floats or any signed integers, I had to convert them to 8 to 16-bit unsigned integers in order for them to show up in the viewer. Okay.
It's valid.
So that also means taking, whatever imaging format I'm given and converting it to, 8-bit floating or 8-bit unsigned integers. So, that was easy. And then having a company that we were working for say, can you document this? Can you point to documentation that says that this works and that you are not changing anything? And I'm like, oh, by the way, I'm leaving. It's this guy's project.
No, I cannot. No, you might be interested to know on the topic of floating point. There was this fascinating book called The End of Error by John Gustafson. And he documented this whole concept he had for a new type of a new way to store decimal numbers. And the guy who is kind of the big mucky muck over the floating point standard, the IEEE floating point standard, was like, oh, it'll never work. And so John Gustafson went and built his own CPU to prove that it worked, and it worked. And the crazy thing is, like, when you understand how this idea of the unum works, is like you almost look at this and go, why have we not been using this for the last 30 years? Because what he does is the fundamental flaw with floating point integers is that, or floating point numbers, is that they lie. And we all know this, they lie. It's like, it's when we say 3.0, what we're really saying is 2.999999999. It's like, it's really imprecise. We kind of try and approximate the decimal part, but we never really get to the decimal part.
It's a conversion between your binary representation of your floating point number or your floating point decimal or fraction and that of your decimal notation, because they're not the same. You can calculate an arbitrary place. You can calculate arbitrary numbers in pi. You can say, oh, give me the 500th digit in pi, arbitrary. You can choose an arbitrary number digit in pi that you want, and you can get it, be it 5 million, 5 billion, etc. Mm-hmm. But you're going to get it in base 16. But converting that to base 10, that's where the real problem is.
Yeah, exactly. So the way he kind of gets around this, and I'm probably going to hash up this explanation here pretty badly, but in short is he has a value, because you have 4 odd values anytime you're dealing with numbers. You got 0, -0, infinity, and negative infinity. And I think it was -0, I'd have to double check. He repurposed -0 because -0 doesn't show up in the real world. And so he took -0, I think it was, unless it was one of the other ones, and he set that to be of special value in this scheme. That means we don't know. I have no idea. At this point, I'm just, blowing smoke out my ear. And so what you wind up doing is you have the whole number part, and then you have the decimal part, and both of them represented in an integer-like fashion, but you're honest about when that precision cuts off. So if it's 2.567, it stores it as 2 and 567, and who knows? And so it just stops pretending that it's got precision that it doesn't have, and it literally shorts out at a certain point. And he's got all the math set up so that this, I have no idea, is just kind of built into this system. And so you never wind up with it lying to you when you add 2.5 whatever to 2.736 whatever and get 3 places of precision, because you can't. The most precision you can get is 1 place of precision, because that uncertainty cuts off at the second decimal place.
Oh, that's a great way of engineering uncertainty quantification into like hardware calculations. That's actually really, really important because of this entire field of mathematics called uncertainty quantification, in which you look at what you know, and you look at how well you know that, and you understand that outside the boundaries of that, your certainty of knowing falls off outside of your standard deviation, and then you can do calculations with your quantities and narrow in on, this is what we know, and these are the probabilities outside of that range. Like, what is the probability of a tsunami in a particular region in Washington State after an earthquake in Japan? You can start making these kinds of calculations.
So it's all about strategic honesty, basically.
Yes, exactly.
It's mind-blowing.
And I actually haven't worked anywhere close to that field in getting on 10 years. So I have to say what I don't know, which is, of course, this strategic honesty. And, it's very Socratic to admit what you do not know.
Absolutely. You don't know what you don't know, but if you do know what you don't know, please tell us. That doesn't make any sense at all.
No, it does. It does. So this is about like instead of BSing people, you're like, I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend I know. And if you know something different, this is my best guess. If you have a better guess, let's combine our best guesses and see if we can iterate to a solution that can work better than something either of us would try on our own. And that's perhaps my own approach to coding. I can't do a waterfall approach. Like, get all the specs ready and go. It never really works for me because I never know all of the requirements ahead of time. I mean, gosh, there's always some correction in motion. Like, I was working for New York University and another large imaging company, and here's all of their constraints, and here are their requirements, and built everything to their constraints and requirements. And lo and behold, it doesn't behave like they expected because they didn't communicate a particular requirement. That the constraints contradicted with their unspoken requirement. Oops!
Yeah, communicate. Well, it's why we say that programming is mostly communication. It's like, you can know all the languages on Earth, but if you can't communicate, you're going to have a very hard time shipping usable code.
Yeah, but on the front end of that, before I was even involving, yes, there was definitely a communication issue. Say, it's like, oh, there's this hype, there's this selling, and then the actual deliverable doesn't quite feel like what they were sold. So, well, you do your best as the engineer on the line for delivering it, especially if you weren't part of the sale. And that's why I like extremely functionally diverse teams. Like, you have people that specialize in the front end, you have people that specialize in data science, you have people that are, like, customer facing and sales minded, and you have this this entire merging of interests and abilities to be able to work well together in a hopefully non-competitive way. And that takes that nebulous idea of team building a coherence, building an ethic, building a culture that works.
Okay, so you were saying you had some sort of business premise pun thing.
Oh, yeah. So during the pandemic, there's just been so much disconnection. So, like, I remember going up to, like, just walking through the office. There's a couple of dozen people, and just observing just their body language, like if they're focused or not, or if they're kind of like coasting a little bit, and whether or not, and if I have a question, I'm like, oh, how are you doing? Introduce myself, who I am, how are you doing today, et cetera, or going to the water cooler or the coffee dispenser or the ice cream that's in the fridge, or the snacks that they have available, and just talking to people, just these random collisions that go on, that because culture isn't top. It has both a top-down component and a bottom-up component. But where culture lives is in the direct interactions between people. It doesn't live in mass meetings or all hands or what have you, where people are on the spot. It lives in those very personal interactions between people. And so the thing about this pandemic has done is it severed those very personal interconnections with each other that are sometimes, yes, wrought with uncertainty and risk, but it's very human. So I thought of this thing called like a random collision coffee hour, where basically you are, like, you're kind of randomly assigned somebody. You can choose yes or no, and just confirm that you actually want to talk to the CEO or not, or somebody that you can have this random conversation with, say 10, 15 minutes for an hour, these random interactions with people for team building. And it's like speed dating without the romance. So that's the hook without the line in the sinker.
Hi, Bug Hunters Cafe. Marta speaking.
Yes, we're still open 24/7. You can find us at bughunters.cafe and on Twitter, Dev, and Instagram as Bug Hunters Cafe. Our special today is a free paper towel holder with every order, while supplies last. What wood? I think it's oak. Oh, we have plenty, don't worry. Yes, see you soon. No, I'm not selling them for you. Yes, well, you should have thought of that before you made 29 paper towel holders. Before you made 32 paper towel holders? Oh dear.
My friend who has a big company does that.
Yeah.
Every week they have an algorithm that groups up 3 or 4 people, and they have a chat together over the coffee.
Yeah, this is meant for like pairs, because you have different group dynamics depending on how many people are there. Your personable interactions start really fading out around 4 or 5 people. You start behaving more and more like a group rather than a set of individuals that are getting to know one another.
For my completely remote team, now granted, this is a little different because my team is entirely programmers, and I'd probably adopt something more like what you're talking about once there's non-programmers, because you want to get programmers out of their department a lot, because it's too easy to get caught up in programming mindset and forget that there's practical applications for what we do. But within the context of programming, I do we do a lot of pair programming at my company, especially since we're fully remote. But one of the things that we do is, while most of the time you can pick, pair programming partners, you can just say, hey, would you help me with this? Or this seems to be your specialty. We help with that. Or can I help you with this? There's that voluntary component. There's also one assigned pair a week for a month, every month, because it's a 6-hour-a-week internship. So every month I assign a pair, someone to someone else as a pair, and I keep switching it up. So that way everybody on the team will at some point or another have to sit down and pair program with somebody else. And I tell them, who's driving and who's navigating is up to you. Whose code you're working on is up to you. How your dynamic works out is up to you. But you just work together. And it's created some great opportunities for programmers to kind of get to know each other, get outside of their usual code base, or get a different perspective on their code. And it's great. It's cool to see people voluntarily say, hey, I want to pair program with you because we always get something done when we work. And they're crossing those kind of invisible divisions between projects and going, hey, I think I could probably help you with that. And they're just getting together spontaneously, and it's amazing to watch.
That's cultural connective tissue right there. by strengthening individual relationships and building confidence in one another's strengths. That there is cultural connective tissue.
Yeah, that is great. I yeah.
This is weird. Like, I find myself less and less interested in the actual technology, and more interested in the overlap between technology and culture.
You are evolving into Gerald Weinberg.
Who the heck is Gerald Weinberg?
Okay, Gerald Weinberg is a psychologist who just kind of gravitated towards the programming field, and he wrote some of the most important books in the programming field on how people in programming interact, how projects work. He's my favorite Gerald Weinberg quote, and I've brought this up in the cafe before. My favorite Gerald Weinberg quote is, if builders built buildings the way that programmers write programs, and the first woodpecker to come along would destroy civilization.
Yep.
This is Gerald Weinberg. He's absolutely genius.
Yes. Okay. Weird fact. I programmed in probably over 17 different languages in my entire life.
Wow.
Starting with BASIC, assembler, Turtle Graphics. I programmed on the Apple IIe's and just direct machine code, bunch of different versions of C, bunch of different versions of Python, Object Pascal, Oracle Power Objects, SQL, if you could call that a language, many variants of that. MATLAB, if you can call that a language. Python, Go, and I'm missing a couple here and there. PHP. Perl.
Even he chokes on PHP. Everyone chokes on PHP.
It's meant as an object-oriented language, but just its syntax and its structure is just the way what people do with it is horrendous. It just doesn't look pretty. C looks, if you done right, C looks prettier.
Oh yeah, C is like working with wire. It's like artwork with wire. It's really unruly. It's really difficult to work with. You can make a royal mess of it really easily, but if you get it right, it's absolutely beautiful. PHP is like splatter paint.
Yes.
There was a programming comic called Commit Strip that made the disturbing observation that PHP is technically the father of React, because React was developed by PHP programmers at Facebook, and PHP was a critical piece of the infrastructure in developing React in the first place. That's kind of a disturbing realization. Explains so much.
The object, like early on, I started interacting with JavaScript, and its document object model was such a turn off that I haven't gone back. And people are doing some great things with JavaScript these days.
I have great respect for my colleagues and my younger brother, who is a front-end developer, but I tried working with JavaScript 12 years ago, and I still have nightmares. I'm not going there.
No, I'm in the same boat. I'm not a huge fan of JavaScript. I do kind of sort of enjoy working in it because it's so terrible. I enjoy a challenge. I like debugging seg faults, so I'm weird like that. But it's an awful language. They don't have integers. Everything's a floating point in JavaScript. To relay back to the earlier conversation. Now, yes, some engines do implement integers, but there is no integer called for in the JavaScript language standard. An integer in JavaScript is still actually a floating point, and it just does the rounding for you. It's not nice.
So I do like the challenge of figuring something out. My last 3 weeks at my job was basically taking all of the projects that I had queued up for the next 3 months and either completing them or figuring out how to hand them off. And I basically gave a 36 project archive to everybody that I worked with. Like, here are my folders with the date, the project name, doc, code, data, download folders under each of them. So and just sprinted really hard and did a couple of months worth of work within about 2 weeks. And now I'm shot. But it was fun, wasn't it? It was very fun. It's nice to leave a company being generous with my work. And then, yes, leaving them a pile of cookies with a grumpy-looking pug saying, "Enjoy the damned cookies," over my old desk. I had to do it, and my old boss is laughing at that because he thought it was awesome.
No, that is rather awesome, yeah.
But what I'm coming around to is I'm really enjoying this interface between culture and the tech, and really trying to wrap my what makes a stable and sustainable culture. And that comes down to having a internally consistent set of principles and values that you express in an externally and consistent manner. How you speak to other people, how you do your work, how you uphold their capacity to discover and express their own values in a compassionate and consistent way. So this is kind of bizarre. Like, how I'm supposed to be a techie. I'm supposed to be a nerd. What is all of this like soft skill stuff that I'm getting into? This is weird. But it ends up being how my own thought processes are evolving to how do you support people doing something complex? Because code, it like mountains of code are increasingly complex. And so you need to manage a complex dynamic system, culture, to effectively manage another complex dynamic system, mountains of code.
Well, and arguably, the whole only reason the code is there is to manage other increasingly complex systems, e.g. going through the visual data from... So the thing is that really what you're doing is you're not moving away from programming, you're getting closer to the heart of programming, which is how to manage a complex system logically.
Yes. So one of the things that really... Like, I've known about unit testing and so on for like the past 10 years, and just like, whatever, and I don't want to do all that extra work and la la la. But for the code that I've written in the last 6 to 9 months, I've just the team ethic became more oriented around automated testing, doing unit tests, integration tests, and end-to-end tests, and different seams in between them, and just really committing to do that, and watched how, because of that testing ethic, that for a very large project, my component became the most robust and resilient of the parts in motion, and how that automated, that testing ethic actually does build more resilient code and resilient projects, helps me know sometimes the conflicting design elements that lead to what we call bugs more effectively. So there's the design intention of the program we're writing on a small scale and a large scale. And what I'm finding is sometimes the design intent of what I'm writing on a small scale contradicts the design intention of what I'm writing on a large scale. And that contradiction causes errors and crashes and seg faults and stack traces and whatnot. And it's getting those design intents in line with one another, all the while requirements are changing. And the requirements changing means that your overall global design intent is changing. And so you need to go back and look at all your local design intents that were were written with a different global design intent in mind. So, yeah.
That's reminding me of how so many programmers like to say, "Well, it's not a bug; it's a feature." And it's the fact is that we often forget that the spec can have bugs, the design can have bugs. Case in point, Telegram. I had to file a bug report with Telegram because something wasn't quite working, but it was connected to another feature where everyone is complaining that, well, when a Telegram message comes into the Telegram chat client, that the window immediately takes over if you have this option checked that says, focus attention or bring attention to the window. Now, what the people at Qt, which is the framework, intended with this feature, is the window alert function in Qt5, is that it would flash the little thing in the tray. But apparently they did something a little bit strange, because they and nobody else, when they use that functionality in GNOME, it doesn't flash the tray, it brings the window to focus and grab the keyboard. And why it does that is not entirely clear. It does this in Cinnamon as well. Any of the GNOME-based, or GNOME 3-based, desktop environments, they will do this. And it doesn't happen with any of the other frameworks, just with Qt5, and so it's a bug. But for the longest time, people were reporting this with Telegram, which is built in Qt5, and they're saying, "Well, no, it's not a bug, it's a feature." And well, it's just your desktop environment is just doing something weird, and and so it took something like 24 reports before the people over at Telegram finally figured out, oh, this is a bug, not a feature. It's like, if your feature is causing your users to complain on a regular basis, it's not a feature, it's a bug. Yes, you may have intended it to do this, but if the user's not intending it to do this and users are consistently complaining about it, it's a bug, no matter how intentional the bug is.
Yeah, and that wraps around to who's the programming for? Is it for the programmer or the user? And it's always, the adage of the customer is always right can be pushed a little too far, but sometimes it's very appropriate. Who's going to be inhabiting what you're designing? And then you get customer personas and customer narratives, and how do you inhabit the perspective of your user such that they can have the best experience. And thus there is this whole developing domain over the last 5-10 years of user experience. What is the user experiencing in the interface? So one of my friends who just moved to Google as a user experience manager was saying he was working at Mayo, and he wanted everything to be smooth and beautiful and Mac-like, just give a real elegant interface. And he was trying to give this to MD, PhDs, surgeons, physicians and whatnot. And they were saying, like, this is awful because the information isn't dense enough. We don't like it. It's insulting to us because the information isn't dense enough. And so he was building something for the wrong user profile. Whereas you or I using that interface was like, oh, this is nice, elegant, there's a lot of white space, But the doctors are like, no, we don't like it. It's not dense enough.
Well, I mean, that's probably the reason why for the longest time, say what you want about Windows or Mac, but regardless, there's no getting away from the fact that Windows has dominated the business and science field up until Linux became mature enough to move in, and Linux typically mirrors Windows aesthetic, as much as they would be insulted by my saying that is the reality. The aesthetic that Windows set with 98 and onward is mirrored by much of the Linux ecosystem. Mac, on the other hand, there are some fringes of, there's some fringes and some corners of the Linux world that look like Mac, but the Mac aesthetic was more popular with designers and artists and musicians and the creative sciences, whereas the hard sciences were all gravitating towards Windows. And I think what you mentioned has a lot to do with it. It's the density of information. Mac's always been obsessed with white space and mostly invisible buttons. and Windows is more interested in throwing all the information on the screen and handing you a scroll bar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's reflected in what these different users are looking for. And you have different companies like Epic. I don't know if you're familiar with Epic. They're one of the largest providers of electronic medical record interfaces in the world. They basically they manage at least 1/3 of all the medical records in the United States. They're based out of Madison, Wisconsin. Mayo Clinic just had a $1 billion contract with them to use Epic as their electronic medical record keeping system. But Mayo is the largest employer in Minnesota. It also has sites in like full hospital sites in both Arizona and Florida. They're basically, you will never be outside. If you live in the United States, you will never be out in continental United States. You will never be more than a 3-hour flight away from a Mayo installation. So they're huge. And the design ethic for Epic has always been incredibly information dense. Of course, they program in this awkward language called mumps.
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 Oh, I've heard stories of this.
No. And I've gone to like a friend of mine who writes point of sale systems in mumps. And I looked at it's basically like it's kind of this weird mashup between BASIC and COBOL or something in COBOL, because it's all very like column oriented, your commands, but it may have evolved since I last saw it.
It's a committee designed language, in case you're wondering why it's this terrible.
Okay, but I interviewed for Epic and learned enough mumps to run away screaming.
Normally we get vaccinated against mumps, so I mean, I'm just saying.
But Epic is building a lot of interfaces for their flagship product, written mainly in mumps, to other kinds of systems, such as like deep learning systems written in C and Python, and other artificial intelligence algorithms. But the way they like to present it is in a very particular mumps-driven interface that's very information dense, that is unlike anything that I've ever seen on Windows, Linux, or Mac.
Wow. Information density.
I want to see that.
No,
I wish more people would appreciate it, though, because like modern web design, I've never taken to it. I like 90s websites still, because back in the 90s, you go to a website, it is information. You are going there for information. It is information heavy. I mean, yes, the templates from front page should have been burned, but it was information centric. Now you go to a website and it's a whole lot of doom scrolling and scroll hijacking and all sorts of weird effects, and it's like 90% huge graphics and 10% text, and you're scrolling for about 20 minutes just to find the contact email address for on a portfolio, and it's like, just give me the information. Again, maybe that's just my own information based aesthetic going on there, but
so I agree with you, because have you encountered Tristan Harris at all?
No, I have not, although I do have to briefly say this conversation is reminding me of Mitch Kapoor's talk, the Software Design Manifesto.
No. I'm just saying that these certain ethics have been gravitating away from a cortical engagement of information to more a subcortical engagement of our emotional reactions.
Yeah.
Graphics heavy is more midbrain. It's appealing to your emotions rather than appealing to your reasoning capacity. This is also consistent with Jonathan Haidt's book, like The Happiness Hypothesis, and what is it? Um, The Righteous Mind, in which he compares our brains and our neocortex to a monkey, and the subcortical regions to an elephant, where the monkey rides on top of the elephant and is, for all senses and purposes, a servant of the elephant. And so the way that marketing works is it appeals to the elephant, not the monkey.
Makes sense.
And so the websites that we're all complaining about right now, they're appealing to our emotional, reactive selves rather than our intellectual selves. And Tristan Harris, who was featured in Netflix's much maligned documentary called The Social Dilemma, he's from I forget, Institute of Human-Centered Design. He used to work at Google, and he's saying this is how interacting with computing is these days. It's all appealing to your emotional reactions rather than your intellectual engagement.
Well, this suddenly explains why I keep switching my theme on Linux to look like Windows 98.
What?
Yes, yeah, I have. There's a theme for it. You can actually switch to. You can make your Linux look like Windows 98. It makes me feel very calm and centered when I see that slight gray, and yeah, it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful.
I never liked Windows 98.
Really?
Yeah, I was always more of a 2000 guy.
Really?
Windows.
Well, they have a theme for them too.
I know.
You can get the Windows 2000 theme if you like, but yeah.
Windows 95 was also kind of horrid. And Windows ME,
Well, I often say that every other release of Windows is terrible.
Yes, exactly.
Because 3.1 was solid, 95 was a disaster, 98 was solid from a technical standpoint, and then ME was a disaster, XP was solid, Vista was a disaster, 7 was solid, 8 was a disaster, forget 8.1, that's still 8, 10 is solid.
10 is solid.
The next version that they're going to come out with, just a heads up, when they announce the new version, stay on 10, it will not work.
I am never, ever... I only interact with Windows if I have to.
Yeah. Well, I named my Windows computer here. Its network name is actually Pandorica. So if you watch Doctor Who, you will understand what that's reference to.
Oh yes.
So we always like to ask this question before we completely run out of time here and our coffee gets cold. What is the weirdest bug you've ever encountered?
Oh God, I don't tend to keep track of my bugs. That's because I'm usually problem solving around them and getting. So I wouldn't say it was. Hold on. I would say the weirdest bug I ever encountered was the 500,000 lines of code that I was left to manage by a bunch of undergraduates at the University of Washington that they basically wrote to interface with one another in 5 different languages. That itself was the bug. That's the bug right there.
The entire project was the bug.
I'm sorry. But, okay, you have a PHP front end that is interacted with, you click a little icon on there, and it fires up a MATLAB GUI so that you could segment brain tumors. And then you do analysis in Python or some other language. And then you have another application written in Java that's interacting with Bash-centric scripts to. So I'm sorry, but it's just written in 5+ different languages, and to actually debug the entire pipeline, you have to dip into one language, come out, go into another one. It's just crazy. It's just, no, this is insane.
Finnegan's Wake, the code.
Yes, exactly.
Let me guess. There were 5 students who wrote it, weren't there?
Yes.
Okay, I know this because of Conway's Law, and I brought this up every conversation we've ever had in this cafe. Any organization that designs a system, defined broadly, will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure.
Well, that explains a lot.
And I guarantee most of them did not agree on a lot of things.
No, because the principal investigator of that particular lab was basically, oh, I have all this money. I'm going to throw it at these students and have them make something wonderful for me without actually telling them what I want. So, and I will, if they present to me something to me that does adhere to what I want, I'm just going to tell them what I don't want rather than what I want. I'm going to define it in the negative. And of course, she had the initial front end of her website was designed in pink. Ugh. She was a very pink and black design fashion individual. I could appreciate how the pink and black looked on her and commented on how it honestly commented on how it because if you're going to compliment somebody, you need to be authentic about it because it's BS otherwise. So, but it did not work on a web page design at all. They eventually went to a two-toned blue design, which was much better. So the communication was not very great from the top of that particular lab. Luckily for me, there was an individual that managed, a manager of that lab that communicated much more effectively. And he was probably the principal reason that I have been encouraged along the career path for the last 6 years since, was because of his mentorship. And that is what makes me focus on mentorship as a powerful force in any kind of project I work on.
Yeah, I believe you told me on one occasion when you're networking, if whenever you get somewhere, whenever you achieve something, whenever a door opens, take the time to thank the people that made it possible for you to go through that door.
Yes.
In the first place.
Yes. So these are my, this is I cluster these in my touchstones of networking. How do you build and maintain a network? Is first, express your interest in other people. Do not fake it. If you find yourself faking curiosity in what other people do, politely excuse yourself, save yourself time in them. Secondly, share interests of one person to another. It's like, oh, here's an interest. I love talking to Jason. Jason, please meet Drew. And here are complementary interests, and hopefully there's synergy there. Get permission to introduce. It's called a double opt-in introduction. Get permission to introduce people to one another, because when you do that, you end up looking really good. Thirdly, actively demonstrate how your skills and interests add value to theirs. It's all about adding value. Your interest is valuable. Sharing people's interests is valuable. You are valuable. Your skills, your insight, your perspective is valuable. Use these three. Now, when networking for a purpose or an objective, the best line I heard was from a real estate agent. This is my script. He says, "Who do you know that can help me with XYZ? Who do you know? Who do you know that can help me with this application? Oh, you can't? Okay. Who do you know?" And so it helps you traverse an iterative network of referrals, getting to the objective, going back through your chain of referrals, and thanking each node strengthens your network, because you tell them that their contribution to you and your objective was extremely valuable, and that you are available to do this for them. All of these, like, situationally discovered touchstones or guidelines have helped me create a network that spans decades.
So when can we expect the book?
Writing that way is not a forte of mine, so it might take a while. I've been actually asked that question by a friend of mine. I met almost 25 years ago. She was from Dhaka, Bangladesh, and she is now in Norway, married to a Norwegian man, and she contacted me after 25 years on LinkedIn, and we had this conversation, and I'm like bouncing ideas around her. She's like, "Where's the book? Darn it!"
Where's the beef? Sorry, that's been in my head recently.
Oh, yeah.
That old commercial.
It's under the pickle.
Yeah. Oh man, well this has been an absolute blast.
Likewise, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and look forward to having coffee with you, Jason, should you ever be in Minneapolis, and I anticipate you will be.
Yes, I certainly hope I am soon. It'll
be after pandemic, I'm sure, but it's all good.
Quite probably, but at least we can have coffee in this cafe because the pandemic can't get in here. There's a wellness filter that the unicorn keeps in place. Probably I'm sitting there just in utter awe of you.
Antiviral software, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Antiviral unicorn.
Oh, wonderful. No, I have enjoyed myself thoroughly. Thank you for bringing me on for this discussion and some introductions to not only...
It was an absolute pleasure to meet you.
Let's keep in touch. I'd love to do something like this again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bug Hunters Cafe. This is Marta. Yes, we are located online at bughunters.cafe and on Twitter, Dev, and Instagram as Bug Hunters Cafe. Yes, we're still giving away a half-made paper towel holder with every order. Requests? Like the music. All our music is provided by audionautics.com. We have the link on our website. Oh, for the paper towel holders? I suppose. What did you have in mind? One made of cedar? Well, we might. Sir, I will make you a deal. If you take 31 paper towel holders of my hands, I'll see that one of them is made of cedar. A pleasure doing business with you.